You may have read this article in the National Catholic Register by now, but I wanted to continue the conversation here because naturally, when a priest speaks of these statistics that reflect a loss of faith in the Eucharist, they will tell you that it's about bringing back the rail. And that's no surprise. But this 91-year-old priest was apparently not sent the memo that today we blame everything on the need for rails, veils, and Latin for the loss of faith. In this article, the exorcist blames bishops and priests for the loss of faith in the Eucharist. Monsignor John S.F., former spiritual director of Mother Teresa, states that the loss of faith is correlated to bishops and priests who lack fervor in their own faith. But I am going to have to say that it's a little bit more complicated than that. I have moved several times and belong to 5 different parishes. And I have to say that no one has stunted my spiritual growth more than the Catholic priests. I have not known a heterosexual priest who does not have a weakness for women. The only priest who did not pursue women was not heterosexual. But in a meeting, when approached about the topic of witchcraft, he raised his voice angrily and stated that as Catholics, we don't believe in that. 7 years later, he committed suicide because a gentleman wrote to his bishop about sexual abuse. When you hear ignorant women state that extraordinary ministers touching the Holy Eucharist cheapens the Eucharist, they only reveal how clueless they are. First, because nothing can cheapen Jesus Christ, not even the unfaithful priests. Second, some extraordinary ministers are probably living holier lives than that priest. When you hear scandalized people talk about Father Martin and other gay priests, they too reveal how clueless they are. The only one who is not clueless about this is the Pope. He knows that his heterosexual priests are a bigger problem than all the other priests put together. But what does a parent do when their grown children fall away from their faith? What is the Pope, this Pope, or any other Pope to do when his priests and bishops not only lack faith, but they do not practice what they preach? And there is absolutely nothing wrong with reverence. It's the love of reverence itself that will get you in a lot of trouble. If you judge or base your fidelity to Christ based on how reverent people look or how reverent they sound, well, the joke is going to be on you every time. One of the priests who pursued women was the most reverent. He would begin his Good Friday Mass by prostrating on the floor. There was nothing irreverent about that priest or the form of his Mass. And not only do these priests have a weakness for women, but conveniently, it's for married women. And they are very clever and sneaky about it. And quite frankly, I have absolutely no good earthly reason to stay Catholic, but I do so because I assure you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Jesus is truly present in the Holy Eucharist and truly present in the sacrament of confession. And no one, not even a pope, can cause me to abandon that reality. Now, before you go jumping on the current trend of blaming Vatican II for everything, St. Teresa of Lisieux traveled to Rome around 1877, way long before Vatican II, and when the Latin Mass was the only Mass available. And her experience was that she met many saintly priests, but also found out that in spite of being above angels by their supreme dignity, they were nonetheless men and still subject to human weakness. And if you believe those who complain that the problem are women with skimpy clothes or that this only involves young women, I will say to you that after reading Dr. Scott Hahn's book, The Lamb's Supper, I began to attend daily Mass. It took a few months, but I began to notice that I was getting extra attention from the altar, in the homilies, in the pastor's corner, in the church bulletin. But St. Bernard tells us that with Mary on our side, we will not be deceived. And when I looked around, I realized, much to my surprise, that it's the women with veils the modestly dressed, sometimes with 8 children, who are usually the insecure ones who respond to the low key extra attention. It is for good reason that Jesus speaks about hypocrisy. It's a real thing. So it behooves us to stop demanding answers from everyone else and start changing the world by living authentic lives ourselves. Our Catholic Church offers us excellent tools to help us live holy lives. We need to stop spreading false teachings and get serious about living out the gospel.
I've been working for the church for 20 years. And a catechist for over 40 years. I'm an extraordinary minister in the church. But my problem is that I've been disappointed by so many priests and even the bishop. I've gone to the bishop on occasions that I thought were important. I'm not one to call him up every day, but there's been a couple of times that I went because the priests were doing things they shouldn't be doing, and I thought he should be aware of that. And I worked for several priests, and I'm at the point in my life that I need to get past this. I need to find a spiritual director and say, hey, people disappoint you and you need to go on. But this is my church. It's a church that I love. And one of the priests that has been dear to me has been disrobed.
Don't be a pagan. Be a saint.